There's a cat over here. There's a cat over there. And the wrong one died. And the wrong one died.
Welcome to The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. I'm your host, Mike Abrams, and today we have another amazing guest. She was on the most recent tour of Cats as a Swing, covering Bombalurina, Demeter, Rumpleteazer, Syllabub, and Tantamile. So welcome, Elana Valastro, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited. We are actually recording live, which is the first time we've done this in a long time besides BroadwayCon. So if the audio sounds different, that is why. But let's kick it off with my favorite first question, which is your experience with Cats before you were cast in Cats. So tell me a little bit about when you first saw it and what your experience was.
I mostly remember growing up and having Cats be the butt of every joke. Like in musical theater canon, like the musical theater community, like I just feel like Cats is the butt of every single joke. And I'm sure I had seen the movie when I was young, because I remember Victoria, like I remember the white cat, and I remember Misto, I remember somebody was sparkly and turning. So I'm sure I had seen the 98 movie, and then when I was, I don't even know how old, maybe like 10 or something, I saw the tour when it came to my hometown. Okay,
so you saw the 98 movie, and then at 10 years old, you saw it on tour. What city? Where are you from?
That was in Burlington.
Burlington, okay. Mm-hmm. So 10 is a young age to see it now, especially now that you know probably a little bit more of the backstory. Did you pick up anything as a 10-year-old, or did you just go to see dance?
No, I think I just went to see the dance. I remember once again Misto. I remember the Mistopheles number being, having sort of more excitement for me as a child. I also remember there were streamers at the end, either end of Misto or end of the show, I don't remember, but there were these silver, this like confetti cannon that they shot into the audience, and I remember that feeling, being like, ooh, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. But it was literally from the confetti cannon, which we did not have in our production.
No, okay.
No, so I actually, like in rehearsals, I was like, ooh, are we going to shoot confetti? Because that is what I remember.
So this was probably the 5th tour, I think, U.S. tour, because yours is technically the 6th.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the 5th tour going around. I don't know if there's any changes in that production compared. I mean, maybe little things like the confetti tour, but I don't know if they cut anything major. So, okay, so you saw it at 10 years old. Did you see it any other time between that point and actually being cast?
I don't think so, except for when I auditioned. Or no, I guess I did my audition, and then when I was called back as a way to prepare, I tried to watch the 98 movie. I was very busy, so I didn't have a lot of time, so I sort of sped through, and I remember I got to Naming of Cats, and I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, what am I watching? And it's funny because I have since, obviously, like, drunk the Kool-Aid, and now it's so meaningful to me, and it has such a place in my heart. But at the time, I was like, what is this?
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, it is. I've seen the 98 movie too, and as I told you earlier, I saw it on a plane, which got a lot of looks. So it is a strange viewing, and to do it, so I guess it's probably a little different if you're doing it as you're prepping to know you're going to potentially go in the show. So were you knowing that, especially as a swing, were you watching multiple characters? Like, how do you view that?
No, I actually just watched for Demeter, because I was in auditions for mostly specifically, well, I thought it was just Demeter. I'm sure they were looking at me maybe for other people, but I thought I was in for Demeter, so I remember watching Macavity. And the hard thing about auditioning for the show is you don't know the choreography yet. So you're trying, you're standing there in front of the team and you're singing the song and you're trying to just sort of move like a cat, but you don't have any specific choreography. So you're sort of just like trying to be slinky and like a little feral, maybe a little sexy, maybe a little like, paw action, but we hadn't learned it yet. So it's so funny thinking back to my audition. I'm like, I don't know what I was doing, but I had watched, Macavity of the 98 movie just to try to get the feel of it, but didn't know the choreography for my audition.
Did you sing that song? Did you sing Macavity?
Yes, and actually they had me sing the whole thing. So I did Bomb's part and Demeter's part as like a one woman. Well, I did McCavity, which is normally a duet, as a one woman number, the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, but you covered both, right? So
I did, and I ended up covering both. I didn't originally cover Bomb till like halfway through the tour.
Okay.
They added that for me.
Okay. So you get cast. I'm fascinated by what you are told, and especially as a swing where you're being told about like most like if you're covering one character, it's like, all right, I got to figure out the backstory for this one character, or a little bit of like that on top of the dance number and the song and everything else. As a swing, you've got 5, 6 that you're covering.
Yes.
How do you think through kind of like, this is the personality of this cat? Like, how much did you learn about each one?
I definitely I think, well, they actually started me with only 3. So when we started rehearsals, I was only covering 3, and then they added 2 more for me through the course of the tour. And Kim, our director, was really good about saying, you know, as a swing, like the first time you go on, just make sure nobody dies. Like make sure everybody's safe, because this show, you know, people are flipping, people are leaping, it's so physical. And so she said, if you are in a safe spot, you know, maybe not even the right spot, but if you're in a safe spot and everybody survives your first time as a swing, because we don't get rehearsal. We don't get rehearsal with the cast. We don't, you know, we can like do it ourselves in some hotel lobby, which we did all the time, like truly every day. But that is very different than doing it on stage. So, you know, the first goal is everybody safe? Am I in the right spot? And it's a little more, you feel like a puzzle piece, just sort of fitting yourself in. And then the more that I did each role, the more fun it was to really play around, start to, you know, be able to give the full expression of the character, for sure.
How does that change when you talk about a character like Rumpleteazer, where there's very clearly eyes on you at a point? And I guess it's the same way with Bomb and Demeter versus like maybe Syllabub or Tantamile, where it's a little bit less focal point. Like, does that change how you kind of think about it, where it's like, just kind of make sure you're not in a dangerous spot? But when you're Demeter and Bomb and Rumpleteazer, all eyes are on you at moments of the show.
I think when you're on stage through the whole thing, you're just trying to be the best that you can be. So even if you are Tant, which, you know, unfortunately, like Tant's doing all this amazing choreography, but is largely in the dark. Like a lot of people come see the show and you talk about the twins, and they think you're talking about Mungo Rump, and they don't even notice the twins. They don't notice Tant and Korko, which is really unfortunate because they're beautiful and they're doing all sorts of beautiful things. But when you're on stage, you feel like everybody's watching you, even though in the back of your mind, you know, because I had seen the show, I watched it when I wasn't on stage. I know that everybody's doing a million different things. Some people are in the dark. Some people, it's a very complicated show, and I know that the audience probably doesn't have eyes on like that cat who's just like licking themselves in the corner. But you feel like everyone's watching you. So I think, you know, no matter what, you're trying to be the best that you can be. But yes, there was definitely more pressure for some of the characters that are more featured. Yeah,
I think it's so interesting because I didn't know much about the twins when I especially first started. And as I've interviewed more cast members, I think they might be 2 of the most fascinating characters in the entire show. But it's one of those that, like, I'm not sure I could pick them out of a lineup right now.
I know.
And that's where
no one could. It's actually so unique. Really sad.
Yeah. But I have the same thing. I can't. There are moments where I'm like, I can get ready and watch the 98 movie, and there are other times where I'm like, I can't do it. But I really want to watch the 98 movie and just try to follow them, which is, I think, going to be a little hard because of the way they do the shooting of it. But if I ever get a chance to see it, I think it's fascinating to follow them because of the fact that they basically see stuff before it happens. So it's like they jump around. They're like very ahead of it.
They're guiding things. I mean, the same way that Monk is sort of the narrator. Like the twins actually impact a lot of the show, but for some reason people just don't notice.
Yeah, I get it. There's a lot. There's 25, 30 cats. There's a lot going on at all times. There's no plot, so you're trying to figure it out to begin with. So I can give a little bit of a pass for the majority of the audience that are seeing it. So let's talk a little bit about who'd you go on as first?
Rump. And I actually went on for Rump for our final dress. It was like our press night, final dress rehearsal. You know, they're videoing, taking pictures, like the press pictures. And I was sitting in the audience with the other swings. We had never at that been, as swings, we had never been in full cat. So the main cast had, you know, gotten into full cat. They were in their wigs, their costumes. I had just had my first costume fitting, I think, the day before.
Wow.
So I literally put on the unitards for the first time the day before. that final dress rehearsal. And we're sitting in the audience, and I remember I looked over to Brian and Megan, who are two of the other swings, and they were my close friends. And I said, we're watching the show happening. And I was like, I cannot imagine being up there, because at that time, I had never put on the wig. I had never felt what it felt like to be in Cat. We had never been on stage even, really.
Wow.
Like we had never, it was so foreign to us as swings because we hadn't experienced it yet. And they had told us that we would get swing rehearsals, we'd be, very comfortable. But at that point, we certainly were not. We were just like still sort of grasping at the choreography. And so we're watching this final press night dress rehearsal, and Mungo Rump happens, and they do the cartwheels, and they fell. And Kelly and Max, it was so scary to watch them. They they started turning, and then they just went down. And
wow.
And it was this absolutely horrifying moment, scary for them. And then all of a sudden, Brian turned to me and he said, "I think you got to go backstage." And I was like, I should go backstage? He's like, yeah, you got to go backstage. And I went running backstage, and, stage manager comes out, Kim comes out, they're like, into Cat right now. And literally 10 minutes later, I was on stage. And then I ended up doing in full Cat. And then I ended up doing opening night. And I was on as Rump for the first few weeks.
So you came in halfway through the show.
Yeah. It was like mid-show, swing on, yes. And poor Kelly, like, oh my gosh, how terrible for her to not be able to, do opening night. Like she was Rump, she had rehearsed it, and then it was really sad. And
yeah, it's such an interesting thing because this show is so physical and dangerous. It seems like, of all the other shows you hear, it's like you hear so many injuries. And then, I mean, on tour, I don't think you had to rake stage as much. I didn't know what that was until this podcast. But then I learned about that. I'm like, that seems crazy even more. But there's just so many injuries that's why there are so many swings and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But so you went on. That is
with
so interesting.
Literally no rehearsal. I'm embarrassed about my opening night performance because I had never, the show was so foreign to me. Like the Junkyard was a place at all.
Yeah.
It was still, I had just, like the choreography was barely in my body, and we were trying to learn so many tracks, and so to then go on for opening night, like obviously my performance grew the more I was Rump, but I wish, of course, that I had been able to have any rehearsal before opening night.
What was that morning like before opening night? Because like you got a half a show basically the night before, and then it's probably like, oh, it's like very real. Because I think that first night it happened so quick that you don't even get to think about it. Yeah. But you had the whole day to think about it on opening night.
I mean, I definitely reviewed as much as I could. And we did have I had a short rehearsal, maybe 1 hour with Max to just review Mungo Rump, do the feature. I had also never sung it. I hadn't had a music rehearsal, so I had never sung it with, our music director, with our conductor. Like I just had never done any of that. And so I had a very first rehearsal on opening day to just sort of make sure I knew everything. And then I did say something wrong. I can't remember if it was the first night or the second night, but the song starts like Mungo, Jerry, and Rumpleteazer, and I think I said and then the next time I said and, like I was just messing up the ors and the and, which is it's not a big deal. Like in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal, but I like barely knew the show at that point.
Didn't know the songs or anything. This is the exact type of scenario that fascinates me because I didn't know what a swing was until I started doing more of this. And now the more I like talk to swings and hear about it, it's like it's unbelievable to me to be able to do something like that and cover so many different characters, be ready to go on in a moment halfway through. I think it is a little bit, in Cats, it's probably a little bit less noticed by the audience because everyone's in full costume, but it happens so much more than I think anybody realizes, and it's so different and unique just a part of the industry that I don't think many casual fans have any idea about. Yeah, and as a swing too, like it's really hard to have a perfect show because, I mean, perfect, quote unquote, like what even is that in live theater? But it's hard to have a perfect show because you don't have rehearsal with the cast. So there's so many new variables, and sometimes you make a mistake and you come off stage and you laugh and you're like, oh, haha, that was so funny. And sometimes you come off stage and you just want to cry because you're either
embarrassed or you feel like everybody saw, even though nobody saw, no one in the audience knows that you made a mistake. But it is funny. There's such a range of emotion when you finish a show. You're either like, okay, like, oh, that was a funny little mistake, or it can be really, really heart-wrenching.
Yeah. I mean, I think the beauty of doing it 8 nights a week or however many you do on tour, I think it's sometimes even more than that. You get a lot of chances. So as a swing, sometimes you don't. I mean, I guess you probably knew with Rumpleteazer you're going to go for an extended period of time.
Yeah, and we were on all the time. I think I did almost half. Like we were very used. I mean, I think it was COVID too, So all of a sudden somebody's out for 10 days, and then as soon as that finishes, one of your other characters is out for 10 days, and then there you have it, So it was partially COVID and partially just how difficult the show is.
That is wild. So how many times did you go an extended period of time with one particular character, or did you go like one night, one cat, one night, another cat?
I did both. So I did open the tour as Rump. I was Rump for at least a few weeks. And then, from then on, I sort of alternated, although then I was Rump again for an extended time and then switched to Syllabub, then went back to Rump. Like it really, I did have long stretches where there were really barely any nights that I wasn't on. But then, then sometimes I wouldn't be on for a week and I'd be like, wow, I'm not on this whole week. I mean, that was rare, but.
It's, again, such a wild concept in general. I want to talk a little bit about your going back to the beginning of the rehearsals and everything. Can you walk me through what you were told about each of your characters? Like, what do you remember stories of each one?
Yes. I remember, Rump, in mind, I remember they're not siblings. Like most people think that they are siblings, especially because they change into costumes that look the same. Like they change into these costumes for the feature, so that they're matching, which is like a sibling thing, but they're actually not. And supposedly Rump has a really big crush on Mungo, which the more that I got comfortable, that was really fun to play with. Like when I would do it with, Max or Brian, and or actually I did it with Sean. But it's fun to play with that. Like if Mungo maybe gives Bomb a smile or something, then like for the next scene I would be like give a little snarky eye to Bomb because I didn't like her because Mungo flirted with her or something.
That's
and he's mine. Like know what I mean?
I've always thought that they were siblings. I don't think I've ever. So that has been
according to Chrissy Cartwright,
according to fact.
Yes, she's the cat's guru. They are Rump has a crush on Mungo. So that was
they're like
fun.
Bonnie and Clyde basically.
Yes, exactly. Bomb and Demeter, Demeter has this history with McCavity, and has managed to escape that. Bomb also managed to escape that, but I think was a little more in control of the situation.
Demeter's story is what fascinates me about the show, of that, like, it's just known fact that she was sexually abused by another cat, and it's like, we're just gonna go with that, and kids are gonna show up to the show every night, and we're just gonna ignore that fact.
And the way that Chrissy really described it when teaching McCavity, I mean, as a swing, honestly, it's really hard to focus on these details when you're trying to learn. Like, I was trying to learn Demeter's track and Bomb's track and the ensemble girls track when she was teaching it, but she was so specific. Like there's one moment where Demeter sort of looks up and leans back, and it's because she's picturing him on top of her, but then she sort of shakes it off, and then is he over there in the corner, and maybe he's over there, so your eyes just go over there, but you're sort of scared, but you also kind of liked it, but maybe not. Like there's so much push and pull in that number, which is really fun. Although as a swing, it is hard to fully embody that when you're also thinking, where am I going now? But
I love that you're trying to take those moments, but at the same time your guidance is just don't get anybody hurt.
Right.
So it's like a little different to like dig too deep into all of like the super nuances when it's just like, okay, am I in a spot where someone's gonna backflip and land?
Right.
But okay.
Right. And then Syllabub, the youngest cat, has sort of this like pure, beautiful excitement for life, and this anticipation for what's to come as sort of like the baby cat. And then Tant, it was really fun. It was almost like a acting exercise to match whatever the chorco is doing. So Taylor, who played our chorco, he was a really great leader for me when I would go on as Tant, and we would do things in sync, and I would just be like, there's an acting exercise where you don't know who's the leader, and you like wave your arms around and things, and just sort of, it's supposed to be in unison, but one person is actually leading, but you just have to be so in sync. And that was sort of the whole show as the twins. And so, that was fun too.
Yeah. Did you, I mean, I think it's interesting because you did mostly paired stuff and then syllabub. So did you did you feel freer when you were syllabub and you were a little bit more like around the stage versus like, I'm always kind of partnered with somebody?
I think I felt the most free as Rump, only because Rump and Mungo can do so many things and can play around in like sort of a goofy way, a fun way, a poking fun at the others way. But yes, I mean, Syllabub was nice because, the first night I'm like, okay, I'm sitting here in the corner being a cat. And then, maybe the next night you notice that Skimble is right next to you. And so you can be like, oh, I'll go nuzzle Skimble. Like, yeah, it is fun to have a little more flexibility there.
Now, which one of that you've done, which one did you think was the most difficult, and which one did you think, I don't want to say easiest, so which one do you think was most difficult, because they're all difficult to do? Like, which one was the hardest to kind of get into?
Bomb and Demeter were the easiest for me, I think, because vocally that's where my voice naturally sits. That's physically, they're more standing too. So like Syllabub is on her knees the whole time, just crawling the whole time. And like at the end of the show, you stand up and you're like, oh God, like I was just like in a little ball for 2.5 hours. So, but Rump is definitely the hardest female track in my opinion. Like also because everybody else gets a 5-minute break in Act 1 while Mungo and Rump are doing the hardest number in the whole show. So it's in my opinion. But so everybody else gets to prepare for the ball and have this like nice 5-minute break. You like get water, stretch, make sure you're ready for this big giant 12-minute ball dance number. And Mungo and Rump don't get the break at all. So they literally just go right into it. And so definitely the hardest track is Rump.
So that means that Mungo and Rump are doing like 17, 18 minutes straight of physically demanding dancing.
Absolutely. And you have a little bit, when Old Deuteronomy comes in, so after they finish the feature, they're sitting on the car boot and Old Deuteronomy comes in, but you don't leave the stage. You never, they literally barely ever leave the stage. Like Rump has, I think, like maybe 1 or 2 parts in Act 1 where she can get a little bit of water, and otherwise that's it. And it's so physically taxing. So in my opinion, Rump's the hardest. Demeter, Macavity into the Macavity fight is a bit of a push, but it's nothing. It's not quite the same as Rump.
The ball is always talked about how demanding that is in general. So to have
and some cats leave the stage and some do not. And Mungo and Rump
are the ones that don't.
Rump leaves once, but only to come in for a lift in a different entrance, and Mungo never leaves the stage.
And you just need Grisabella's track where you get 15 minutes on stage. Just hang out, come out.
But she gets paid more.
Exactly. That's a secondary reason of why she shouldn't be the Jellicle choice.
Her paycheck's too high.
Paycheck's too high for less time on stage.
Or maybe actually everybody else's is too low in reality.
Very fair. Very fair. My last question for swing question is, when you how does your on tour, your routine change when you're going to be on or maybe not be on, or you said you had weeks where you're fully off? Do you have a different routine? Because I talked to a lot of people on your tour where it's this is my morning routine. I do this, I do that to make sure you keep your body and health in shape to be able to do this show every night. It's a little different when you're not always on every night. How did you prep for that? It
is hard to have a routine on tour, especially because, you might have a day where you're on a bus all day long, and then you get to the theater, and if all of a sudden they're like, okay, you're on, and you didn't expect to be on the whole day, you didn't have in your brain that night. Or alternatively, if you weren't on, some of our theaters didn't have space for the swings really. So ideally we would be during the show, we would be stretching or practicing or, doing a little workout or running the show, some sort of productive time, like use of our time. And a lot of theaters we really couldn't because we didn't have the space. So, and then some theaters you have a beautiful rehearsal space and you're able to really utilize that. So that was, it is tough to find a routine. And there's also something, like if I knew I was going to be on for a full week or something, like if somebody had COVID and I'm like, okay, I'm on for the next 10 days. It's a different mindset than when it's like an hour and a half before the show and you see that the stage manager is calling you and you're like, oh God, okay. Yeah. And you answer the phone and they're like, you're in. And you have to, it's a different energy that's required to all of a sudden like flip that switch and be like, okay, I'm in, Yeah.
I always compare it a little bit to, I played hockey growing up and as athletes, but when your games are, and it's not like, unless you're like a goalie or something, it's like, or maybe basketball or some other sports where you don't necessarily go. It's like, I always knew that we were going to go in and play at some capacity in that game. But I thought about like, all right, what did you carbo load before those games and stuff. And as a swing, you just don't know that if next night tonight. No. So it's just such a unique thing.
Brian had one show where he hadn't really eaten and it did not go well for him.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Sort of passed out. So.
Yeah, because it's so demanding to be able to do it. We're going to take a quick break for some messages from our sponsors, and then we'll be back for more of The Wrong Cat Died. I want to talk a little bit about the new movie.
Okay.
We talked about the 98 movie.
Yep.
I think your tour is kind of interesting in the fact that like it kind of did happen. Like there was another buzz because of the movie that the fifth tour and all these other ones didn't have to deal with, and even the revival didn't deal with. But there was, after 2019 and really into 2020, there was the tour that ended for COVID, and then you all picked back up. Did you feel kind of like, well, first of all, did you see the movie? How'd you feel about it? But then did you feel that there was some like people that maybe were there knowing that was their only introduction was maybe that 2019 movie?
Yes, I have not seen the full thing. I've seen clips of it, and it is honestly very cringy to me. I mean, there are some beautiful dancers in it, beautiful actors. Like it's not their fault. I don't want to say, but like
no, totally.
But
it's one person's fault.
it's an interesting movie as far as I can tell from what I've seen. I think at some point I should watch the whole thing, but maybe under the influence,
Yeah, as I say, I saw a press viewing. It was an experience.
Oh, wow.
And then I saw half of it again with my family, and they just were like, does it get better? And I'm like, it doesn't.
No.
So we stopped.
No.
You would need some either influence or like bring some of your former cast members with you, like
we
where
can
you
all
can kind of enjoy
together.
it.
Yeah, I actually
live
with Bree now, who played our syllabub. So we'll watch it together.
Yeah. One night, have some drinks or something to make it more enjoyable.
Yes.
And be ready for chaos.
Yeah, but there definitely were people in the audience, I think, who had that was their most recent memory, or that was their only knowledge of the show, which is
bad.
Interesting. Yeah. And I hope they enjoyed the stage version. I think it is meant, I mean, the 98 movie does a really good job of filming the stage version, but I think it is meant to be seen on stage.
I don't think you can. My experience, again, like it was 2016. I was not ready to see it. Didn't know anything about it.
You were stunned.
And I walked in, and I think the thing that the 98 movie and definitely the 2019 movie doesn't do justice is you just walk in and you walk into the experience. Like the junkyard is a junkyard. Like and I had really great seats the first time. So the set is fascinating and so cool and very intricate. And so you do walk like you feel like you walk into an experience. And then for me, I don't think your cast got to do this because of COVID, but like Green Eyes, you start the show with all of a sudden a cat in your face. And so it's like, neither of the movies can do that justice. But the 98 movie does a pretty good job of giving like a pro shot version of where you see a stage production. They added in a few special effects to make it like Mustopheles has a few like lightning bolts and like some other things that like 1998 CGI basically is like what they could add.
And did anybody from my cast tell you about Cats in Concert?
I don't think.
Okay, so we had one night where we're on the bus and we're heading to the theater, and Grace Buckley, our resident choreographer, stands up and she said, okay, so the freight elevator was broken in the theater. They could not get the set in. They could not get the floor in, the lights, like any of that. And she said, so we're just going to do a concert version.
Wow.
And so
where was this?
where was this? Somewhere in Iowa or Indiana or South Dakota.
I didn't come to Indiana. It didn't come to Indiana.
Okay, then it
so I can
wasn't.
tell you,
Okay.
well, maybe it went to Evansville. It didn't come to Indianapolis. 'Cause that's where I'm from. And it was supposed to come with the first one, but in April of 2020. So I don't think it went to Indiana.
Some Midwest-ish.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds right.
We were somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And we only had one night in that theater.
Okay.
And so they decided to do the concert version of Cats, and we walked. Oh, and she said all the swings will be on. So she said you will all of us, all 10 swings, and all main cast in full Cat.
Wow.
Just doing a concert
so you had
version.
to get in full Cat to do a concert version?
Yes, so we had duplicates because we don't have our own swing Cat. Our costumes are the same. The same.
Wow.
So Bree and I were both dressed as Syllabub. Megan was a second Jenny. Like everybody was a duplicate essentially. And then Kellyanne and Carolyn were both baby Grizz. And then Tay had full Grizz. Like so they just sort of. There were duplicate cats, and they said, just try not to be like next to each other at any point. They said just sort of like stay on the other side of the stage. And when we first walked in, there were chairs set up. Like we were just going to sit there and sing the show, and then that got cut because I think Grace Buckley was like, I'm not having these grown adults like sit in these unitards and just sit there in full Cat. So basically for 2.5 hours, we just crawled around the stage because they didn't want us to do any choreography since it wasn't the full version of the show. They didn't want it to sort of be like bastardizing somebody's work. Like it's disrespectful of somebody's work to do sort of half of their work.
Totally.
And so they said no choreography. You're just a cat. And for literally 2.5 hours, 32 grown adults crawled around a stage and sang Cats, but did not have any other aspect of the show.
So you didn't dance at all, or like loose, but not like the full thing.
We just sort of moved around, I'd say. And then by the time we got to Misto, Paul did sort of improv it. Like he it's hard. Like how do you get to Mistopheles? Well, he's supposed to just stand there and sing.
Yeah.
And there's so many dance breaks. Like there's a 12-minute dance number, the Jellicle Ball, like, and so we're all like moving around the stage trying to be cats.
They played every single thing.
Oh, they sure did. Yes, they did.
It's such an interesting decision because when you said Cats in concert, I'm like, oh, okay, they just played like the album.
No.
Yeah, like play the tracks. just play everything. Forget all the stuff in the middle.
We did the whole thing, and we were all on stage too. So we get to the part where we're like we have to find old Deuteronomy, and like Indalacio's just sitting there on stage in his old Duke costume. Like so, it was just really wild.
Like, was there the whole kidnapping scene? Like,
we did everything, but everybody was just on stage the whole time, and we just sang it and tried to pet ourselves and lick ourselves like as cats.
This is good for next time I talk to you.
You'll have to ask somebody else about it.
Well, here's what I want to ask. I want to ask Taylor because we hopefully are still going to find time to record. But I want to know because she had to do a whole show versus her.
Yes, I think at some point they might have taken her. She did a lot of the first act. She might have done the whole first act. And then at some point they said to her, it's too weird. Like into act 2, I think they said, it's too weird. Like you're supposed to come back, right? Like you're not part of the tribe. You're not supposed to be sitting there, which she was the whole time. And so I think they took her, they sort of like waved from the wings or something and said, come on. And she then, I think from memory, she did enter from memory.
That is fascinating. I had not.
It was
I
really wild.
definitely not heard about that because I would have remembered that, and I would have had a lot more questions. I'm gonna probably have a lot more questions. I'm gonna be asking you as I think about them after we finish recording. That is so unique.
They gave the audience the offer, I think, of being refunded. I think they said you can come. They phrased it in a very funny way. They were like, you can come in for a once in a lifetime, like never seen before version of Cats, or you can have your money back. Yeah. So
I mean, being from the Midwest, I bet you probably had a pretty full crowd still.
I think we did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel
depending
bad
on
for
how,
them, but we did. I
that
don't
does
know.
suck. Depending on how small of a town you are, like you get to some of those small towns and it's like that has been on the calendar for probably 6 months.
Yeah.
And so it's like that is the night out. Babysitters
or more because
are
of the pandemic. Like some of our people had been waiting for years because they thought it was coming before the pandemic.
Yeah. So interesting. All because Afraid Hour didn't work.
All because they literally just could not get the set in, and so we did Cats in concert.
Isn't there?
All dressed
I guess
in cat.
this would be so hard to figure out, but there's one of the tour I think before the pandemic used an inflatable set.
We did have we had an inflatable set.
Okay, so you couldn't even get the inflatable set in.
I guess not. They could not get anything in.
I called it the bounce house set.
And it's so loud too.
Yeah,
it's really loud. Like we had one sort of swing rehearsal where we were practicing on the stage, but because we didn't have sound, like we weren't mic'd, it was just the swing sort of on the stage. And I was being Syllabub, but Syllabub sings her little, moonlight, like in the upstage corner right near where the bouncy castle is, like its loudest.
Yeah.
And so the other swings could barely hear that I was singing, and Connor was like in the wings, and I think maybe he just didn't know that somebody at that swing rehearsal was being Syllabub or something, or he just didn't think of it, or he just was in the wings and was like, and he starts singing full out like Syllabub's little bit. Like Connor is like just full on singing Moonlight, and everybody's like looking over, although I couldn't hear him and he couldn't hear me, but we both were singing Moonlight together.
Yeah.
But the set is so loud that it's really hard to hear.
Again, fascinating things that I've learned because of this podcast of that there's inflatable sets that travel around. Okay, let's switch to some quick rapid fire.
Okay.
You played a lot of cats, but if you could play any cat anytime, forget whether it's male, female, vocal range, dance number, just if you could be one cat one time, who would you want to go on as?
Ooh, I liked Demeter best out of all my tracks, but I think it would be fun to be Skimble, maybe.
Skimble.
People probably say that all the time.
It's a wide range of answers, and it's usually someone that either says something that's like the opposite of their personality that they would just want to do, or it's like very away from their vocal range, or for something else, where it'd be like, it'd just be fun to do that. So Skimble is a good answer.
It's also like a crowd pleasing number. People love it. You get, there's the train, and it is. I've grown to like it. I had a scarring moment the first time because when they make the light and they shine it out into the crowd, it hit me, and I just remember being like, I don't like Skimble because of that moment. Because I'm like, I couldn't see it. I was like, trying to like close my eyes and get my like sight back for the next part. So I always have this like slight anti-Skimble that I probably shouldn't have, and it's grown on me. We had one, just like a quick little anecdote. As my, I had been Rump for so long, and then I switched to Syllabub, and then I went back to Rump, and in my brain I was like, well, I know Rump so well that I didn't review Skimble as well as I needed to, and I accidentally we're making the train, and I got, or like earlier in the number we sort of make a train with our bodies, and I got into Bree's spot because my brain, I had just been Syllabub, and then I was Rump, and you have these moments where you look down and you're like, what cat am I right now? Like where am I going? And so in my head I was like, okay, follow Vic, and I did, and all of a sudden we're standing there in this train formation, and I realized that I was wearing Rump's costume, and I had turned it into Syllabub. And Bree, the angel that she is, she just like got into Rump's spot. She was like, okay. And she just saw me in her spot, and then she went into Rump's spot, and we like finished out that portion of the choreography in our swapped spots. And just, she just went with the flow, which was, thank God she did that. But that was one of those moments where, the audience doesn't know, so it was kind of funny, but I felt bad. I was like, oh my gosh, I like forced her out of her character.
Yeah, exactly. There were a few people, I don't know if they were in that particular show, but there are some Junkyard fans who would know. Oh, who would know.
They sure would.
And because trust me, early on, I got called out on any error I might have said in the show of like, that's not right. I'm like, well, is it though? Because I don't think there's answers to a lot of stuff.
Right.
Who are your favorite and least favorite cat?
John, who played Bustifer did an amazing job as Bustifer. I think that number could get cut.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm pretty sure that number did get cut because there's a Royal Caribbean Cruise.
Yes, a shorter version.
A short 90-minute version.
They gonged
I'm pretty sure
Bustifer
got cut.
Yeah, in my version of Cats, he could also sort of get the boot, I think. Although, John did an amazing job.
Yeah.
It is funny, but...
I'm not talking about cast members. I'm talking about Cats.
Just the character. I'm like, get rid of him. And then my favorite, what is my favorite? I do, it is cliche, but I think that Memory, the song, is famous for a reason. It really moves people. People love it. My mom has a, really beautiful connection to the song because as her mom actually was passing away from cancer, like my mom and her sister sang Memory to my grandma as she was essentially dying. Like it's such a beautiful song, and it really, people have such strong connections to it. So there were nights where I would, we're on the sidelines for Memory, and I would be, some nights you're in it, quote unquote, a little more than others. I mean, you're always invested. You're always, you're always giving your all. But there were some nights where I was just very moved by that song,
Totally.
And Tay was amazing. Like, she sounds beautiful. So, sometimes I would just sit there and I would be totally, engaged in the beauty of that song. Now, that's not to say that I think Grisabella is like the best character, but she definitely gets the best song.
All right, I was gonna say this is gonna get it really hard for my last question. So that is my next question. Which is your favorite song?
Okay. I think Memory or Macavity. Macavity is really fun.
I know. I think that's my answer right now.
Yeah.
But my answer's changed a bunch of times.
Macavity's fun. Although Mungo Rump is fun too. Once you build up your stamina a bit, it's really fun. I'm trying to think what else. I think that's. Yeah. I like Macavity the best.
You kind of covered my order of that. When I walked out of the show the first time, all that was stuck in my head was Mungo, Jerry, and Rumpleteazer.
Okay.
So it was like that was the one I was just like,
earworm.
it's just stuck because it's like they just say their names over and over again.
Yes, they do.
Then as I started doing more prep for this show and like listen to it more, it's Macavity.
Yeah.
I have a beef with the Macavity song though because on the actual the cast album, it's like an 8-minute version because it's got all the other stuff in there, and I'm like, no, I just want the song. Like,
right?
Can I cut a version where I can just listen to them singing? But when I first saw it, Memory was the only thing I knew. Yeah, and so it's like it's kind of that progression too. We talked a little bit. We're recording this, and I know you said you're doing a little work at the U.S. Open. We're recording this during the U.S. Open. It'll come out probably after it's over. I'm curious, which cat do you think would be the best tennis player?
Ooh. I have to admit, I am working at the U.S. Open, and I know very little about tennis. One thing that doesn't make sense to me is why does it go from 0 to 15 to 30 to 40? Why is the scoring system not in even increments? Like that should go to 45, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's a lot of questions in tennis.
Okay, let's see. Best tennis player.
I do have an answer for this, in my opinion.
I feel like Jelly Loram probably plays tennis.
That's a good answer. I hadn't thought about that. I thought Skimble.
Well, yes. Okay, I
could
see
see
that.
Skimble having a very regimented training routine.
Skimble and Jelly play tennis together.
Yeah, and then I could see the twins being really good at it.
Yes.
They're like psychic
for sure.
For
sure. They're just like off, like bop, 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 back and forth. They know they're doing it. Yeah,
they're running ahead.
Like Jelly and Skimble are playing in the court next to them, having like a little bit more of a low key game, but like still having fun.
Yeah. Okay. My final question is: I've argued at length that I don't think Grisabella is the right Jellicle choice. So I'm curious if you agree with me, and who would you pick, or if you, with your passionate defensive memory, are going to pick Grisabella.
I feel for Gus because I think that Gus did everything quote unquote right. Like Grizz sort of went off the beaten path, got lost.
Yep.
She lost her way, and Gus did not. And Gus has stayed this really loving, wonderful figure for the tribe. And so you feel for Gus because you get the sense that he's old enough that he will die. Like Jenny, Skimble, those cats, they don't seem quite old enough that this is their last year of life. Like they probably will have more years, and maybe they'll be next year's or the following year's Jellicle choice. In the show, I actually wish. Speaking on that, I actually wish that, maybe Jenny, Skimble, maybe Jelly, I wish they were older because I think it would raise the stakes. Like if you had say you had like 5 or 6 very old characters who weren't going to live anymore, then who do you pick? Like, then it raises the stakes of the show to have people, like, they are going to die if they are not reborn, But in this case, it's really just Gus or Grizz, maybe Duke, but he's like in charge of everything. So I think I feel for Gus because he lived a really wonderful life, but maybe that's why he doesn't get reborn is because he did everything that he wanted to do, or he did live in the way that he wanted. So I think, I think the way it's written, it has to be Grizz, but do I wish it wasn't Grizz? Yes.
Okay. Well, we're going to cut that part. I'm just going to have you say, I think it was Gus. No, I think you're spot on with this, which is that like, it depends on what your criteria is for Old Deuteronomy. And then it depends on if it is truly age. Because I think one thing that you're saying, which is I think mostly in agreement with most people, but maybe a little bit different, is that there's even another level. Because I feel like there's an older level. There's basically like 3 tiers of cats is the way it seems.
But there aren't enough older cats. And you're kind of
adding a 4th tier almost. Because you're saying that there's Gus, Old Dude, and Grizz. And then there's the like Skimble, Jenny, like that kind of another layer of older cat. Then there's the teenagers, and then there's like the kittens, and so that's interesting.
At least in my brain, that's how it is. Like,
I think it's fair.
Is Skimble obviously Skimble is we go through each of the characters and they are up for selection, but Skimble's never going to get picked. Jenny's never going to get picked. They're too full of life. Like, I think, why would you rebirth them for a new life when they still have so much life in them?
So that goes back to criteria. So if the criteria is who needs it because of like they're no life left, then I think it is a competition between Grizz and Gus. Maybe he'll do depending on how you look at it. But it almost seems like he doesn't really have an age.
He's
almost
like infinite.
Exactly, which is interesting in itself because then when is Monk, who's angling to take over, ever going to take over?
I don't know.
But you could answer different criterias, which is where some people have gone into. Is it worthiness? Is it need? Is it is it a life lesson that he's teaching? And that's where it becomes more fascinating. Like, what is the actual answer? So, but I like it because you said Gus. You didn't say Grizz. So I'm going to just stick with it's between the two of them. And we're going to stick with Gus.
We're going with Gus, but I do feel for Grizz. I don't know,
My personal belief right now still is, and this has evolved over time, is that if it is need and acceptance and teaching a lesson, why are you immediately killing her? Like, why not give her a year with the tribe to be back with the family that just accepted her, and then she's next year. Send her next year.
But will she make it? I think, well, yeah, she's not that old, is she? I mean, in the revival, it's actually funny. In the revival, she's younger. So in the original version, she is older, and maybe then you might believe that she might not make it to another year. So that's why they need to pick her now. But in the revival version, she's 30s, which. So you're to your point, Let her live out this life then, and let her change now. Why? Exactly.
So
then I will say that leads me more to Gus because he's gonna die.
That's exactly what this whole podcast is about. Is I'm slowly convincing everybody to be on my side here.
You're pulling me over to your side. You really are.
That's it. Gus and Grizz are the two most common answers for this show, and I don't disagree with it.
I guess it makes sense. Although maybe throw old dude in there. He should be reborn, or maybe not. Maybe he's in his final iteration of life.
I question when is his time, and how does that choice get made?
I don't know,
because it's separate. It's a separate question
Monk's
from everything else. Yeah, exactly.
I think it's when Monk decides, okay, you're done.
But I don't think that's a ball. I think that's going to happen between
balls. them, and then everyone will gather for the Jellicle Ball, and there'll be no old dude, and it'll just be Monk, and that'll be it. And everybody will be like, "What happened? What happened? What happened?" And cats too, exactly. And it's Monk's killing of old dude.
That's the horror version of Cats.
Well, the horror version. I'm quoting Brian. One of our swings. I don't know if you've seen Midsummer, the movie. He says that Cat is just the plot of Midsummer. So
I've not seen it.
You'll have to see it. And okay. This is your homework. Your homework. Watch Midsummer and tell me that it isn't cats.
Okay. I thought the other horror I have heard is, and I forget who, somebody from the Fifth Tour, that it was the old dude, was that they're like kind of running joke is that old dude's a serial killer, and this is his way to hide it.
Oh my gosh!
Is that every year he can kill a different cat as a serial killer?
Yeah.
So that's the horror version of this as well. But I'll have to watch Midsummer now to see. I'm not a big horror film fan, so that's why I've avoided that show.
Yeah, that's fair.
But okay.
Yeah, basically
I will watch it.
It's very culty. They gather once a year and basically decide who to kill, and that is cats.
That's cats.
That is cats.
It's oh my god, the cats falls into so many things I haven't seen too. Because someone's it's basically a chorus line.
Okay.
Type of thing.
Yeah. They go through
There's a couple other.
Character.
The way I envisioned Cats, which was a singing competition initially, is essentially 6 as well.
Okay,
so I was like, it can be a bunch of things. But my biggest this is not a Cats take. So for everyone else who's listening, I think that Kinky Boots is the movie Tommy Boy. If you've ever seen the movie Tommy Boy, it's like a 90s 2000 Chris Farley movie.
Okay.
And it's very similar of dad dies, son that was not supposed to take over the business takes over the business and saves the factory.
Gotcha.
And it's crazy the parallels, except for that Kinky Boots is selling super high heel boots, and Tommy Boy's selling
a little more life in
car parts.
Yeah.
And so it's very different in a sense, but the actual plot is identical. And I thought the first time I saw Kinky Boots, I'm like, this is Tommy Boy just
That's funny.
with a different product.
That's funny. Well, I guess it's a good story. People like that story.
There's only so many storylines, I guess you can write in all these things.
Although I will say Cats is an interesting one. Yes, I guess Cats is like Midsummer is like other things, but there aren't a ton of things that you can say, oh, that's Cats.
Yeah.
Because Cats is its own beast.
It definitely is. So, well, this has been super fun. How can people stay in touch with everything you're doing, social media and all different ways?
Yes, I am on Instagram as Elana Valastro. I'm on, Facebook. I have my website, www.elanavalastro.com. I'm going to be doing in October a brief sort of fall contract. It's called the Circus Vampire, and we're doing a immersive Sleep No More-esque circus type thing in Massachusetts in Old Sturbridge Village. So if you're a New England person and you find yourself in Old Sturbridge Village, come to the circus.
Sleep No More for non-New Yorkers.
Yes, that's actually the idea of it, is bringing that immersive experience. I don't think most New Yorkers
know what non-New Yorkers know what Sleep No More is.
Yes, well, if you don't know what Sleep No More is, it takes place in a hotel, in the whole hotel, and the audience, it's hard to call you an audience because it is so immersive, but you sort of move through the hotel. You can follow one character in their journey in the evening. You can stay in one room and watch things pass you by. You can sort of, you create your own experience, and it's never the same really twice. So the idea is to bring that type of thing more in circus form, like that we have a lot of, fire and tricks and magic, but we're bringing it to Massachusetts.
So interesting. I had a very interesting experience at Sleep No More. So
oh, yeah.
I might have to find my way to Massachusetts to see how that goes. Well, thank you for being an amazing guest. It's been super fun. And thanks everyone else for listening to this episode of The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. To follow along, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at The Wrong Cat Died, or check out our website, thewrongcatdied.com.